The Principality of Calenberg was a dynastic division of the Welf duchy of Brunswick-Lüneburg in the Holy Roman Empire from 1494 until 1705, when Elector George I Louis, Prince of Kallenberg, inherited the Principality of Lüneburg to form the state of Hanover territory. When Duke Eric I of Brunswick-Lüneburg chose the Principality of Calenberg as his part of the inheritance in 1495, he described it as the land between the river Line and the Deister. This geographical description, however, was never totally correct. In fact, the principality extended west of the Line from Schulenburg as far as Neustadt am Rübenberger in the north, and thus much further north than the foothills of the Deister. To the southwest the territory stretched as far as Hamelin on the Weser, well beyond the Deister. The city of Hanover was largely independent of Welf territorial lordship, even though it was not formally a free imperial city. Not until George of Kallenberg, who had been a successful general in the 30 Years' War, chose the city as his residence in 1636 could Hanover also be viewed as part of the Principality of Kallenberg, because of the link that had existed since 1463 between the Principalities of Kallenberg and Göttingen. The latter was also sometimes referred to as Kallenberg. Today the term Kallenberg land is usually only used for the region between Hanover and the Deister. History, origins and foundation of Kallenberg Castle. Originally the territory belonged to the Duchy of Saxony, but in 1180, after the imperial ban had been imposed on the Welf Prince Henry the Lion, he lost his ducal lands in Saxony and Bavaria. However, in 1235, Henry's grandson Otto the Child was promoted to the rank of prince as a result of the reconciliation between the houses of Hohenstaufen and Welf, and was given the allodial estates of the family claimed by them in the area between Lüneburg and Brunswick as the new and independent Duchy of Brunswick-Lüneburg. In the region west of Hanover, the Welfs had but few allodial possessions, and so that area was disputed between the House of Welf and the bishops of Hildesheim and Minden. It was largely ruled by comital dynasties, such as the Counts of Walp in the northwest, the Counts of Hallemund in the southwest, and the Counts of Roden in the west and in Hanover. In 1292 Duke Otto the Strict from the Lüneburg line of the Welfs subjugated the region. Earlier, he had yielded to the Bishop of Hildesheim and accepted the city of Hanover as his fief. However, he shook off his allegiance and founded Kallenberg Castle, just 13 kilometers west of Hildesheim, in a countermove in order to further reduce the power of the Bishop of Hildesheim in the Hanover area. Administratively, this area was initially still called the Vote of Lauenrode, after Lauenrode Castle on the outskirts of Hanover, from where the Welfs ruled the territory. With the extinction of the Lüneburg line of the Welfs, the Lüneburg War of Succession broke out, during which Lauenrode Castle was stormed by the citizens of Hanover and destroyed. The Vote was then moved to Kallenberg Castle. Welf inheritance divisions. The Welf dukes did not inherit the land by primogeniture, and this resulted in the late Middle Ages in numerous Welf estates and a great fragmentation of Welf territory. In 1400 the Vote of Kallenberg went to the Wolfenbüttel line of the Welfs. In 1408 and 1409 they were able to purchase the county of Everstein and the lordship of Homburg after the extinction of the reigning families. These were added to the Vote of Kallenberg. In a further Welf inheritance in 1432 to the 9th according to Gudrun Pischke, the area was divided again by the Brunswick dukes William the Elder and Henry, who had hitherto ruled jointly in Wolfenbüttel. While Henry was given the territory of Lüneburg, William was compensated with the newly created Principality of Calenberg. At the time, the lordship given to William had no name. It consisted of the rights formerly owned by the Principality of Lüneburg between the Deister and the river Lina, as well as the former county of Welp, the lordship of county of Halland and the dominions of Homburg and Everstein. Because the Welf princes all carried the title of Duke of Brunswick and Lüneburg, and the territories they ruled were principalities within the Duchy of Brunswick-Lüneburg, the dominions were named after the main castle or town. William spent most of his time at Kallenberg Castle, from where he administered the territory. As a result, it is probable that the name of the Principality of Calenberg emerged during this time. Unification with Göttingen. William succeeded in 1442 and finally in 1463 in taking over the Principality of Göttingen. Although unification with Kallenberg initially came about purely by chance, it lasted nonetheless. In order to distinguish the two areas which were physically separated by the foothills of the uplands in the Lina Valley, Kallenberg in the north was usually referred to as Unterwald, whilst the Göttingen region was called the Oberwald. In 1473 William also inherited the Principality of Wolfenbüttel from his brother, who had no sons, but ceded sovereignty over Kallenberg to his sons William the Younger and Frederick III, known as the Restless or Turbulentus. After the death of William I in 1482, both sons shared the regency. In an agreement dated 1 August 1483, however, they split the rights of use. The younger son, Frederick the Restless, was awarded the rights of use over Kallenberg and Göttingen, and his brother William II was awarded the right to use Wolfenbüttel. William deposed his brother Frederick in 1484 and declared him insane. The reasons for his removal are debated, perhaps by his participation in many armed conflicts. Frederick was seen to pose a threat to Welf rule in Kallenberg and Göttingen, so William II succeeded, albeit only briefly, in reuniting the entire territory of the Principalities of Kallenberg, Brunswick-Göttingen and Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel. After Frederick's death in 1495, William divided the state again and left the Principality of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel to his elder son Henry. Under Eric I, Elizabeth and Eric II, the younger son, Eric I received Kallenberg and Göttingen and thus founded the Kallenberg line of the House of Brunswick-Lüneburg. In the new territories formed, the name Kallenberg was increasingly used for both parts of the state. For the period under Eric I and his son, Eric II, however, the name Principality of Kallenberg-Göttingen was also used a lot. The principality had separate parliamentary estates and separate councils for each part. The chancellery for Unterwald was established in Neustadt on Rubenberger and that for Oberwald in Munden. There were also separate residences, lordly castles or manor houses and palaces in each town, as well as separate repositories for the records. Under Eric I, Kallenberg Castle was expanded into a strong fortress. Another heavily fortified castle which he had built was the Eriksberg near Dassel, on which construction began in 1527. In the Hildesheim diocesan feud in 1519 he was initially defeated militarily in the Battle of Soltau. Diplomatically, however, he was able to win a ruling from the Emperor Charles V that saw a large part of the bishopric of Hildesheim added to his domain. Eric I was hostile to the emerging Protestant Reformation. His second wife, Elizabeth of Brandenburg, however, whom he married in 1525, switched over to the new doctrine in 1535 and promoted it at the court, which then resided at Munden. After Eric's death in 1540, she took over the government for their underage son, Eric II, and implemented the Reformation in the Principality with the state superintendent Antonius Corvinus she had appointed. Eric II, however, converted to Roman Catholicism in 1547. Even though he was raised as an evangelical by his mother, he was not able to reverse the Reformation in the Principality. However, his power in the Principality was already very weak. He spent most of his time as a mercenary leader abroad, and was financially dependent on the towns. In 1553, he had to secure the financial aid of his towns by approving evangelical preaching. From 1574 he had Neustadt am Rubenberger developed as a fortified town and built Landestrasse Castle within its walls as a Renaissance chateau, integrated into a bastion fortress based on the Italian model. In 1582, when the Counts of Hoy died out, the larger part of the county went to Kallenberg. In 1584 Kallenberg also acquired the Diefelds. 30 Years' War after Eric's death in 1584, Kallenberg Göttingen was again ruled by the Wolfenbüttel line of the Welfs. In the 30 Years' War, the brother of Duke Frederick Ulrich, Mad Christian, brought the war to the state, after Danish troops under King Christian IV, who was then commander of the Lower Saxon Circle, was defeated by the general of the Catholic League, Tilly, in the Battle of Lutter. Tilly occupied the whole principality in 1626. Only the cities of Brunswick and Hanover could not be captured. When Duke Frederick Ulrich died childless in 1634, the Wolfenbüttel line of the middle house of Brunswick ended with him. In 1635, Duke Augustus the Elder from the middle house of Lüneburg received the Principality of Calenberg-Göttingen. After his death in 1636, his younger brother George became its ruler. He was successful as a general on the Swedish side, and he also succeeded in 1637 in recovering the country and especially the towns for the Welfs. He initially ruled out of occupied Hildesheim, but then moved his residence to Hanover, which he also had built as a fortress. After his death in 1641, a separate peace was hastily concluded with the emperor, which had to be paid for by the return of the land acquired during the Hildesheim diocesan feud. George's sons, Christian Louis, George William, John Frederick and Ernest Augustus, then ruled the Principality of Calenberg-Göttingen in succession. Elevation to an electorate in 1665, the Principality of Grubenhagen, whose line had died out in 1596 and over which the lines of Lüneburg and Wolfenbüttel had long fought in the imperial chamber court, was also finally added to the Kallenberg dynasty. George's youngest son, Ernest Augustus, who ruled from 1679, carried on the successful policies of his father and his brothers. In 1689, the Kallenbergs also inherited Saxe-Lauenburg. Ernest Augustus switched to the side of the emperor and introduced primogeniture, contrary to the direction of his father. In 1692, for his services to the emperor, Ernest Augustus was rewarded after a long struggle with the title of the 9th Electorate. Officially, he was now the Elector of Brunswick-Lüneburg, and his government was called the Electoral Brunswick-Lüneburg government. In 1705 it was enhanced further by the inheritance of the Principality of Lüneburg, whereby all the estates of the Welfs, apart from the Principality of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel, became united under the line also known as the House of Hanover, from which the British royal throne had descended. Economic and social history. The Principality of Calenberg was initially a rather insignificant territory, and Welf lordship developed here quite late. By the reign of George of Kallenberg in 1636, the Principality had experienced 140 years of almost continuously poor government that cared little about the state. In the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the cultural centers lay outside Kallenberg in the towns of Brunswick, Hildesheim and Lüneburg. New centres were created at the residences of Wolfenbüttel and Celle. Even the city of Hanover was not governed by the Kallenberg princes until 1636. The other towns remained unimportant. Only after the reign of George of Calenberg and its subsequent elevation to the electorate did the former Principality of Calenberg become the nucleus of what later became the German state of Lower Saxony. Industrialization had already begun during the liberal French period. The industrialist, Johann Gestorff, used the economic opportunities of the years from 1803 to 1813 and was able to purchase limestone quarries on the hill of the Lindenerberg, west of Hanover, to burn the lime he had coal-mined in the Deister Hills. His son, Georg Gestorff, started an iron foundry and engineering company. The Kallenberg village of Linden then developed into an industrial town. Princes of Kallenberg. William the Victorious (1432–1473) acquired the Principality of Göttingen in 1463, became Prince of Wolfenbüttel in 1473. House of Kallenberg. Eric I (1494–1540), grandson, Göttingen annexed in 1495, remained part of the Kallenberg lands thereafter. Eric II (1545–1584), son. On Eric II's death, Kallenberg was acquired by the descendants of Henry IV who ruled in Wolfenbüttel. House of Wolfenbüttel. Julius (1584–1589), grandson of Henry IV. Henry Julius (1589–1613), son. Frederick Ulrich (1613–1634), son. Upon Frederick Ulrich's death, his lands were divided between the houses of Lüneburg and Dannenberg, the former gaining Kallenberg and the latter Wolfenbüttel. House of Lüneburg. George of Lüneburg, Celle (1635–1641). Christian Louis (1641–1648), son. George William (1648–1665), brother. John Frederick (1665–1679), brother. Ernest Augustus (1679–1698), brother. George Louis (1698–1705), son, became George I of Great Britain.